Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for spending part of your Friday evening with us. We have a wonderful show, and actually a fun show, I think, planned for tonight. But before we get into that, I wanted to first send our wonderful thoughts and prayers and love out to those of us in the United States here that are suffering in the storm, particularly those people in Texas who've been without power and water and all kinds of necessary stuff, that you need for life. So we're thinking of you. And if any of you out there have a way to help out, please do, because we're all neighbors and we want to look out for each other. But God bless Texas and all those who suffer in this storm along with the pandemic. My goodness, it's just too much. So we are thinking of you and hoping for the very, very best and a quick return to as much normalcy as the rest of us are going to have soon. So I appreciate that. Now, tonight, we have with us, of course, our very own James Martin, who's going to be delving into our family trees with us, going to be digging up the roots. We're going to be talking about genealogy and really sort of the history of that, what it means. Why is it important? Is it important? And, a lot of us in the United States, I know I'm speaking for myself mainly here, but I think pretty generally in the past have really not known a lot about our ancestors, particularly the ones that existed before arrival into America, those of us that came from other places, which is most of us. So it's really interesting, though, and I want to say, I don't know if it's true, but to me, it really seemed like at the time around the Da Vinci Code, when that came out and we learned about the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and that sort of thing burst out on the public consciousness in a big way. It had been out there, since the 80s with, the Bagehot Lee and Lincoln book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which, of course, Dan Brown took a lot from in his creation of the fictional work, The Da Vinci Code. So a lot of people started wondering, I wonder if I'm in this bloodline. So there were all these projects going, all these tests running all over the world, people trying to see if they were in the Sinclair line. And even at that time, I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in going back in my family tree. And I guess in a way, if I want to be completely honest, I just figured there probably wasn't anything very exciting back there, and that, it might be disappointing and it might sort of dampen my view of the past or the romance that I felt about the past. If I found out, I was just a ditch digger, or my ancestors, never did anything important or notable, or, or maybe I wouldn't even find anything just because we were so obscure. But my cousin, John Hare, recently, the last couple of years or so, looked into our family tree, and it was so bizarre because he sent me a copy, and it was really strange how so many relations of mine were either connected with locations or were specific people themselves that in history that I had had a real interest in. And so that brought me to wonder, is there such a thing as ancestral memory, as cellular memory? And so that's one of the things that we're going to explore tonight with, I can't even call him a guest because he's our very own James Martin. Hello, James.
Good evening or good morning from where I'm calling from.
How's the weather over there in France?
At the moment, it's around about 6 degrees and very dark.
You're going to make me translate that. I don't know Celsius.
I don't know what it is in old money, but I just wanted to echo my. I just wanted to echo my thoughts for everyone who this evening are struggling with poor weather. It's one thing that's an issue very close to my heart, coming from Carlisle, as where we used to live, where we had many floods, 100-year events that were happening every other year. It's a very difficult time, and I hope that if anyone is listening or knows anyone who's impacted, please help in any way that you can.
In any way you can. You know, Carlisle, for those that may not know, is right way up there in northern England, right on the Scottish border. In fact, it's very close to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So I was quite chilly when I was there I believe it was in November of year before last, when we were up in Edinburgh for Tim Wallace Murphy's memorial. And I can remember being quite cold, and I noticed you had today or recently had a cartoon picture on your Facebook page of this person in this gigantic coat, and it just completely swallowed him. And you said, when someone from the South visits the North, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's how I am. I'm definitely from the South of the United States. But I remember I bought a coat especially for that trip because I live in Southern California, and boy, was I glad I did. So yes, weather is, more and more affecting us all. In many, many ways, with the rising water tables and all kinds of things, and the rising temperatures in the summer and the plummeting temperatures in the winter. I for the life of me, I don't see how anyone can deny that there's climate change going on. My goodness, I've lived in Los Angeles for couple of decades or so, actually like 3. And I've seen a big difference in the weather since I arrived here, especially in the summer. It gets up to, 112, 115, 120. Never did that before, back when I first moved here. But enough about the weather. Let's talk about our ancestors a little bit. Now, genealogy, of course, according to Google, is the study of families, family history, and the tracing of their lineages. Genealogists use oral interviews, historical records, genetic analysis, and other records to obtain information about a family and to demonstrate kinship and pedigrees of its members. So, as I said, James, this is something kind of a rising new interest, I think, for particularly Americans. I feel like that Europeans and UK residents are more connected with the past because it's all around you. You might be living in a house that was built in 1100. Here in the United States, if a house is 100 years old, we think that's an old house. So there's not a lot of connection that we can just walk outside and see and sort of feel or imagine ourselves at that place during the time, that our ancestors were there. So do you think that's what it is, that, why there's kind of a difference?
Yeah, I think that there's, for example, I haven't lived in a house that's younger than 200 years old. The house that I'm in at the moment, its foundations are from the 14th century. You are connected. There is it's not something that goes through people's heads, I don't think, but the idea of, knowing where you've come from, which town, city, we are bathed in a lot of history. But I think, I think that there's a bit of a, how can I put it? There's sometimes a bit of awkwardness in looking into the past. It's one of the great things about the United States is the fact that it does confront its history a little bit more than we realise. For example, we saw during the civil rights movement in the 60s some very uncomfortable truths finally being discussed. We know with the Black Lives Matter movement, that's still ongoing. And that confrontation with history can be healthy, but it can also be very embarrassing. And I think for a long time in the States, it's been too embarrassing, it's been too awkward to delve into. And I think that as we've seen, with the Da Vinci Code, yes, we've seen with lots of other things, we've seen this great, renaissance of where did we come from? Bad or good? Where did we come from? How does that shape us today? For me, as an historian, genealogy's 101. It's shoved down your throat when you start studying it. So it really is one of the basic skills that we've got. But I just want to say this, for anyone who's going on that journey and is perhaps a bit nervous, or where do I start, and it's such a mammoth task, just keep in mind the following, that for every ancestor you uncover, what you're doing there is you're remembering someone that was absolutely integral to you being here today. Without them, you wouldn't be there. And it's, you will find some really interesting parts of, the makeup of you. But you'll also find a lot of ordinary people who never make it into the history books. And so, in a strange way, you're congratulating those people's memories, the likes of us, really, when you start to find their name and a little bit about what they did.
Absolutely. And it's very exciting to, those individuals that, are not famous, that we can, when you start to discover, little tidbits about their life and what they went through, and the war or the famine, or what it is they overcame in order for us to be here. It's quite amazing. It's so weird though. I brought that up at the first part of the show about how I was so astounded when my cousin John, who you've met, did our genealogy, and I started looking through it and seeing, now, whether or not, these all bear out, he's done a pretty good job of putting it together, and he's a smart guy. And he has worked with some, genealogists, I think, and things, but just the idea that, I opened those pages and saw these names of people that I'd actually been researching. And not only that, but in the very areas, the very locations that were and always have been of extreme interest to me, like Southwest France. I've always had a draw to there in that area. Well, there definitely seems to be some relationship in my family to that area, and which, was part of Aragon, I guess, back at that time. So do you think that there's something to, cellular memory or ancestral memory that, appeals to you about these locations or certain names when you hear them? Like you almost remember it.
I do. Personally, yes, I do. I've had some very strange experiences, paranormal and all the rest of it. But here in southwestern France, there's a small town called Alet-les-Bains. whose origins are very interesting. And being there for the first time, I'd never heard of the place. I was being shown around, and I had this sudden flash of, I knew what was at the head of this particular street or this particular road. And when I got to the end of the road and saw this square with cloisters, very old buildings, I dropped to my knees because it was like a memory had resurfaced. I've had in my own family history, which I might talk about a little later. But in my own family history, what I've had is, firstly, one branch of my father's side of the family seemed to be in the same place, and then in another place, and then another branch of the family are in the same town. And a lot of the places that I feel myself at home at, I've ended up finding that, well, perhaps one of the reasons is because that's where my family lived at one point. I'll just tell you a quick story on that. My great-grandma's surname was Mellon, Mellon. That was her maiden name. And the family tradition was, it was French, or there was perhaps some inbreeding, because there was not too many generations ago. Don't worry, listeners, I have 5 fingers, it's fine. It actually turned out that the Mellon wasn't, in fact, French. This was a corruption of the surname Macmillan. And having done extensive research in preparation for a book, I'm still doing some research on around the Knights Templar, I found myself in Argyll. And, of course, the Macmillans hail from there. And I felt such a home, such a longing, I still feel it today, for Argyll. It's not just the picturesque views and the history. I can't put my finger on it. Mellon, Macmillan, as some Scots moved into England after the Act of Union in 1707, began to anglicise their names. And so it really, it's a good point for me to, my tips really, just for now, in what you should look for with doing your family tree. We all have family rumours, and they're the things that, if you're going to get a piece of paper, I would recommend getting a blank A4 paper book, or if we don't want to use paper, use a digital book, something like this. Jot down as many family rumours as possible. The hit rate will be much better than you realise. In other words, when you start researching those rumours, you'll find most of the time there's some truth in it. Other times, as I've just said about the Mellon family, not so much. But you'll find that the family rumours and the whispers and things like this really important. At the moment, I'm involved in a oral history project. Oral history being the project is looking at industrial relations from the turn of the last century up through to today, and we're interviewing a variety of people. There's a large team of us. We're interviewing a variety of people, really to gather what they can remember, but also what their fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers, family members, what they told them. So we've got it's 6 volumes at the moment, all the way back to the 1850s, simply on the basis of talking to people. Let me put this in a better way for you. If you've ever spoke to your grandparents and they've ever referenced their grandparents, that's oral history that will go back to the US Civil War. So that's the importance of not just the family myths, the family rumours, but talking to people. It's absolutely essential. If you're starting out, if you're sat there right now thinking, where do I begin? Step one, don't go on to Ancestry.com or to any of the other places, Genie, whomever it is. Don't do that just yet. Start interviewing, start speaking to people about what people remember about your family and what they've been told. It could be sat on your grandma's knee while she's talking about her grandma's recipe for rice pudding. You can probably tell that's a real anecdote. No one ever talks about the recipe. They talk about what was going on in the household and in the kitchen and in society. And that's absolutely vital to understand what context people are coming from. So are we talking about an affluent? Was it the great grandma who made rice pudding? Did someone make it for her? What was going on? Incidentally, that recipe for rice pudding came directly from my grandma's mother, who said that it should be so thick you can stick a spoon in it and it doesn't fall down.
I'm sure she knew best.
Yeah.
And I would imagine then maybe one of the next things, that you might want to do is make sure you collect as many generations as you can going back, the names and the birth dates and the death dates, if you have them, of your grandparents and your great grandparents. Some of us can go back, 2 or 3 generations just off the tops of our heads, or, via the family Bible or something like that. But I know, if you have questions about any of your parents' or their grandparents, and your parents are still around, don't hesitate to get as much information as you can while you still, have that resource available.
I think it's important as well just to remember when you're doing so this is oral history. This is what we're talking about here. Keep in the back of your mind there might be some incredibly traumatic memories for those people. So don't approach it. Renee, can I mention aliens? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. In the field of psychology, something I've relatively well versed in. In the field of psychology, there is something known as alien abduction syndrome. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's called that is because there's a traumatic event. I'm not suggesting it necessarily is an abduction, but it's some sort of traumatic event. And normally what we would do is we would talk about David Copperfield style. You was born, you grew up, then you died, that kind of approach in a linear fashion. Well, with abductees, people who have this syndrome, the psychology is to go backwards from today's date. So you're not building up to a trauma, you're hitting the trauma and then diffusing afterwards. So if you're going to talk about, well, what was it like during the Second World War? What was it like during the civil rights struggles, which is still ongoing? Don't approach it from, can you tell me what it was like when you was born? Because if there is a traumatic memory, you're going to be building up to it. So work from today backwards, and don't be too bothered at this point about collecting names just yet. Just ask questions. A really good method is to record or videotape. Not only can you pass those recordings on for posterity. Renee, my birthday is 2 days after Christmas, and the best gift I had was the ability through a Skype session with a laptop that was looking at a TV screen, looking at old, from my mum's house, looking at old videos of my grandma, who was very, very close to me. We're that generation that can do that now. That's not something that's been available to other generations. It's been an oral history. So, record it and preserve those memories for posterity, and visit them, replay them periodically. Also, while you're doing this, ask for any photographs or any documents, it could be identity documents, whatever, anything. It's really crucial that when we're looking at family trees and we're looking at history, remember your Proverbs, context is for kings. So what I mean by that is, if you're going back in time, and let's say you get to the 1700s and you're thinking, oh, well, these lot must be wealthy because, there's some money being exchanged. You have to put yourself in the shoes of those people back then. Were they actually wealthy? Sorry to have to break the secret, Renee, but it was last year we were looking through a will from the late 1600s, and I said to you, oh, look, they had a bed. Yes. And I think you sort of shrugged shoulders.
No, I was surprised that a bed was mentioned in the will. He left his bed to I thought that was odd. But then you went on to explain that not very many people had beds. So a bed was actually quite an asset.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's things like photographs and documents, wills, things like this, help you put yourself into a context that if someone's passing money, it might not be royalty. It might be their entire life savings, or it might be something like this. But that's sort of step one, I would suggest, with all of this. Focus on speaking to the people who are with us. At the end of the day, your family tree, if you're going to be looking at your family tree, it's about birth and death. When you move on and you've collected things, birthdays and death dates are absolutely crucial, and it can be a bit morbid. Looking at people who've passed away and are no longer with us. But either way, what we're doing here is we're look at your family tree as being a sort of family, a very personal graveyard or something like this. It's a place, it's a vault of memories. You're honouring the memory of the people you find.
That's right. Yes, and you never know what you're going to find. You might have an idea, or think you have an idea of what's in your family tree, and you might find something much like the DNA tests that people are getting. They're getting some surprises. But the other thing I wanted to, I thought just for my own interest, and I think it might be interesting to other people as well. But for instance, when, we met, you and I, just very few years back, but we did have this sort of instant connection, and we've sort of been, we've definitely been friends and sort of been working together ever since. And when I gave you a copy of my family genealogy, you found a couple of points of relation between us, and not only between us, but and among us, but among also our friend Jeannie and your husband Max. In different ways. How often and how common is that? And is that just because if you go back far enough, you're going to be related to somebody? Or are there really these connections? And do we sort of gravitate toward each other later on?
I think the answer to that is both. When you're looking at a family tree, it's a bit like a diamond shape. So it starts off with you go further back, and there's a huge explosion of branches as the human population increases, and then it begins to narrow, so it looks like a big diamond shape. There are some people who I have no family connection to, who I'm friends with. Then again, there are friends who are considered family, such as yourself, which I do. Jeannie, I'm sure she'll, when she listens to the recording of this, will really love the fact that she's been mentioned. But Jeannie is a mutual friend of mine and Renee's, and she bears the same surname as my other half.
That's so
and
funny.
their families are from a very similar area. And so we're thinking there must be a connection. So I did what I do, like a fox. I start burying myself in all sorts of documents, and as I do, like I say, this stuff is second nature to me. And a few weeks later, reported back my initial results of there are no connections. I said so with a wry smile, because I found 5 times great grandparent was shared between myself and Jeannie. So that was
funny.
A very weird thing. That was, there's not too many other people that can be related. Yes, we're in the hundreds and thousands, but if you imagine out of a population of 8 billion on the planet, for 2 people to meet up in, one village in southwestern France to find a relation that recent, I felt like putting the lottery on that night, but it was very interesting. You do find that, though. You do find that if you find a longing for a place, it might be that you're connected there somehow. But just a cautionary tale. Some people's approach to genealogy privately has been to, for example, look up a king. So I'm going to pick an obscure one, King Edward III of England, and or King Brian Boru of Ireland, and it's very tempting to then try and go backwards or go forwards from that person to try and prove a connection. If you do that, almost certainly you won't have created a family tree. You'll have created a work of fiction. Which, if you want to work on it, I can help you with that. If you want to do a historical fiction. But as I say, if what we're doing is cherishing someone's memory, then it's important that we're honest.
Is what you're saying, don't work back to front, work front to back, go back,
yes,
not forward.
Yes, and crucially, don't try and crowbar in the coincidences or the feelings. Let them happen. They will, if they're meant to.
That's why I'm so glad I had absolutely nothing to do with that creation of our family genealogy. In fact, I didn't know he was even doing it until it was almost done. And he's still working on it. He's still adding to it. But because I was afraid that I might try to shoehorn somebody in there, just because or a location or something like that. This way, it was totally objective. I was totally objective. It came to me, it was already written up, and I just, oh my gosh, that's so bizarre. And I called him, and of course, he had no idea what I was talking about. I said, do you understand? This is the very stuff I've been researching in these people. And so he was surprised, because he really wasn't into that area of study, but that's just what he found. Now, again, I'm not sure how verified it's all been or anything, but it's been fun and very interesting. And it was even more fun when I shared it with you, and you found some Cumbrian connections between you and I, and then later connections among you and Jeannie and I. And was Max in that one also, or with the Henry?
Yeah, in a
Henry the First. We had some strange connection to him.
We certainly do. Max went through a slightly different line. I just wanted to say, when you're looking at your family history, expect to hit brick walls. You are going to find looking at your family tree is like mining. In fact, that's what I call it. It's a form of mining, and sometimes you will get onto a scene. It is the fact that wealthier families could afford paper, could afford tombstones, grave slabs. They could afford to be written about. So the further back in time you go, you will find that there's a rich seam. Pardon the pun there, but there is there's a rich seam of your family. If they are wealthy and you can find documents, then you will be able to push that back quite far. Renee, with your family tree, certainly the Cumbrian connections made me chuckle. If you were trying to make up your family tree, you picked a very sorrowful story of the former kings of Cumbria, of Rheged, who are no longer really with us. In fact, I'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's ever heard of the kingdom of Rheged outside of Cumbria, to be fair. But I expect to hit those brick walls. So you're going to hit a large number of brick walls. So you've done your oral history, and then it's a time for getting some names and getting some birth dates, death dates, and there are lots of places that you can get things like that. I have to give a shout out to the world's libraries, who in some places are struggling, justifying public funding to keep them open. Please visit your libraries. You'll find that a lot of librarians, library staff, not only are they incredibly helpful, but will give you some tidbits and just things that you might not be able to find solely online. I have a turn of phrase which is Goya. And it stands for, can I say the A word?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Goya, it's a Scots term, and it's get off your arse. In other words, we can be armchair warriors and do all of this, but getting up and going to a place, if you find yourself with French or British ancestry, go to the churches, go and have a look at the records. In the US, your census started back in 1790. In the UK, it was 1841. So you've got some documents. You've got a good head start on us. So you can access things like the National Archives. So if you're in Britain, the National Archives at Kew and some of the regional archives that are found in most cities. The same with the US. There's city archives. Which I know I've used personally on some of the projects that me and Renee have worked on in the past year. But also you can go to Census Bureau and things like this. So you can obtain birth dates, death dates, but the first brick wall you're going to hit is actually not that far back. The first brick wall you'll hit is very recent. So if you know your mum and dad's, whether biological or adopted, it doesn't matter. But if you know their surname, but you perhaps don't know your grandparents' maiden names, or their date of birth, or where they were born, that's going to be your first brick wall. In fact, it could be the case that this is going to be the most difficult thing for anyone to find. When you get into the census period, so in the UK this is still 1911, although 1921's census information will be out next year. In the US, your census data I think is available from the 50s. I would need to double check that. But as soon as you get onto the census, you're in business, really, because census data gives you birth, death, living date, occupation, crucially, where someone was actually born. So, if you've got a family rumour that says, oh, actually, we were from Wisconsin, for example, and there you go. You will find it on a census. If you're from Wisconsin, it is there in black and white. So that takes you back quite some time. Now,
by the way, there are some great resources for the U.S. side of things. Anyway, at USA.gov, just do a search for genealogy section, and there are resources like the National Archives, the census, military records, state libraries, and different things that are specifically set up for genealogy research. I just ran across that earlier today in planning for the show, and there are some really good, because there you're talking about census. You can find them through there. You can also military records are good as well, aren't they? Of course, that only covers a certain section of the population, but still there are some very good records.
Military records, and the further back in time, the more pious people were. So church records can be very useful too.
Yes.
In fact, if you want to jump over the barrier of the census, church records are almost certainly the place that you're going to have to go. That or perhaps some newspapers, but they're not going to take you that far back. So church records, family Bibles, family wills, things like this. Can be very useful. Crucially, your best resource is talking to other people who might already know something about your family back then. The Macmillan's story I told at the top of the hour came from someone who'd actually written a book about that side of the family. So that was a great resource for me. But that's the idea. Your first brick wall will be very recent, and then your next one is going to be pre-census.
Do you mind taking a question from the chat room that we just came through? It says, what does James think about websites like Ancestry.com? Are they worth the amount of money to track your ancestors with their resources?
Well, I use Ancestry.com because the platform is quite intuitive and it's relatively easy to use. Where I would be careful with Ancestry.com is there is a option. It will sometimes pre-fill or give you the option to click yes to a pre-filled mother or father of an individual. That's based upon others' family trees. You can't necessarily contact that person. It's that person's family, the person whose family tree that intuition's based on. So you won't know for sure whether or not it's accurate. Do I think it's worth the money? Well, if you're going to be looking at your family tree, it's almost certainly going to cost something. I would look for, there are more websites out there than just Ancestry. So if I'm ever asked to do personal family trees, I use Ancestry because the platform's similar to drawing a family tree, to be honest. I also use Geni, which is GENI, and GeneAnet, which is GeneAnet. The reason I like GeneAnet is because you can collaborate with other people if you so wish. Obviously, privacy is important. So, do I think it's worth the amount of money? It can be, but there are alternatives out there that may be a little cheaper. GeneAnet certainly is cheaper than Ancestry.
But what about their access to, databases and things like that? Are they similar in that respect?
So the GeneNet and Ancestry, they are predominantly owned by a particular religion, and they basically bid for access to records and all of this. Most of the providers have access. Ancestry is the largest of those providers and does tend to get first access to those records when they're released. I'm sorry, I can't see your name who asked that question, but
I don't see it either.
Let me. I'm just speaking to you. So if you've just asked that question, I'm speaking to you directly. Would you go to a supermarket and pick up the first item of fruit that you see, or would you have a look to see whether there's some larger or perhaps less ripe vegetables and fruits and what have you? Same thing here. You will find the software that works for you. All of the sites have a trial, so it's important that if you're going to trial, make sure that if you're not happy with it, make sure you cancel, because you don't want to get into any contracts or any problems like that. But just have a look at what works for you, because you're going to be working with that platform for a long time. You can get software as well, so you can purchase one-off purchases for family tree designers. The problem there is access to those records. So if you, for example, if you're disabled, if you can't leave your house, you're full-time work and what have you, the reality is you're not going to be able to get out to churches and speak to various government departments to get your information. So Ancestry and similar sites are the next best thing. Shop around.
That's good to know. Yeah, I want to also let that listener know who just asked the question, and everyone else that's listening, is that after the break at the top of the hour, we're going to come back and we are going to pose a trivia question to you. And the first person that answers that question correctly in the chat room is going to get a free genealogy session with James via Skype. So if you're interested in the subject of genealogy and you're listening to this show, I would suggest you get in the chat room if you're not in there now, because you'll have an opportunity to get a free session. Just get your names together as much as you can, and you will definitely learn something. Look for KGRA in Discord. That's how you can get into the chat room. So there you go. All right. Well, we got a few more minutes until we go to break, but I wanted to let everyone sort of be ready for that. And if they're listening and not in the chat room, they may want to get in there. So go to Discord, look for KGRA, and you will be right with us. So you can send in your answer to the trivia question, which will be posed right after the top of the hour break. So, also, I'll be telling you toward the end of the show on how you can reach James if you'd like to book a session with him. And he's really fantastic. I mean, we've had some great sessions looking at our different genealogies and our friends, and quite knowledgeable. And I guarantee you it's not going to break the bank for you to get started on your own family genealogy with James. So there we go. Now, maybe it's a good time to speak about some of our English ancestors and their odd choices of names for some of the villages. I remember, driving through England. It was, I want to say it was the time that I actually drove down from London to France all the way, and going through these villages, they had such crazy names. And of course, you sparked my memory with that, with something you shared with me on Facebook today, with a couple of guys going around all the English towns with naughty names. So what is the story behind these crazy names? I mean, you got things like, what were some of them? Bitchfield. I mean, come on.
Up Bottingham.
Diddling,
yeah.
Puddletown. I mean, just the craziest names, and some of them are, we are under FCC rules on this station at KGRA. We do try to abide by all the Federal Communications Commission bylaws, but these are actual names, so we are not being obscene.
So one of the rude ones is a place called, not too far away from where my family hails in Cumbria, and it's called Cockermouth. So stop giggling, everyone. All that town means is it's the town towards the mouth of the River Coker. That's all it means.
Okay. All right. I got one for you then.
Mm-hmm.
Explain this to me. Wet wank.
Wet wank. I can't.
That's the name of an actual village. That is crazy.
There's the UK, as with a lot of France and bits of Germany and Europe generally, has had a lot of culture.
Don't blame it on the Germans.
Well, that seems to be the British pastime, to be honest with you. But no, for example, in Cumbria, we have a mix of some Saxon names. So if you, a town name that ends with Ham, the root of the word Hamlet, so Buckingham, for example, is more of a Saxon name. If you are from a place that ends with B, that's B-Y, Willoughby, for example, Allenby, they're Norse surnames. They're so-called Viking.
I'm sorry, I just thought of another one. I'm so sorry. Now, I need to ask you, are all the names that you and Jill put on my Facebook page today, are those real?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a town called Scratch Bottom. Or did you make that up?
I think. Well, I didn't say anything like that. You know what? This is how embarrassed I am. That one could be real, and it couldn't, but it might not be. The reality is that's the surnames. You don't want to have a look at some of the road names. I can't say on air the second part to the name, but most English cities and towns that are very old have a grope lane.
Grope.
Yeah.
Well, I saw one today. And I hesitate to say it, but it was BH Road. Do you know which one I'm thinking of?
No,
and it was real.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to say... No, I'm not going to say it. Never mind.
But yeah, you're going to find...
You'll have to go on my Facebook page and see where James posted about the Naughty Place name tour. And read them for yourselves, because some of them are just too ridiculous.
They are, but this is what happens when you've got a country that's had the Norse, the Germans, the Normans, the French, Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, the Cymbric, that's the Cumbrians, the Welsh, the Galicians, the Bretons, the Irish, the Celtic, the Romans, all of these people have left their surnames, and yeah, some of them are incredibly rude. And there's one that begins with a T that I would love to be able to say, because it is a town
I know.
name.
Is it the one that Jill posted?
No, it's the one that it looked like I was calling her something. But it wasn't. It was a town name in Scotland.
Oh my God!
It's not just Britain. If you
this was you that said it. Oh yeah, it's the TW word.
It is. And just recently, to keep it topical, in Austria, we all know what the F word is.
Yeah.
So the F word was a place in Austria who people kept on taking the town name signs down or taking pictures. And this January, that town had to change its name to Fugging, Fugging, for that. So it's not just Britain. If you're going to come to Europe, expect to see one last one on the drive down from Calais down to southwestern France. You pass a little village called Sad Rock, which I always think someone should stop and go and cheer that rock up. But yeah, you find so many just really daft names.
Oh, that's wild. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'd be interested to know if, people living around the United States live near or in any really strange sounding town names. I'm having trouble thinking. I mean, there's Fishkill, New Jersey, but that's nothing compared to the names that we've been talking about here. But anyway, we're going to get serious again after the break.
There's a place called Nothing, Arizona.
That's right. And there's a Hell. I know. So, yeah, I guess there are a few. But we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, don't forget, we're going to ask a trivia question. And we're going to ask you to answer it in the chat room. The first person to answer it correctly will get a free genealogy session with James. It's going to be fun. So I hope everybody has good luck. May the best person win. All right, gang, we will be back shortly. Stay tuned to Night Vision, and we'll be right back.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied, but you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Permanent industrial glue impossible to remove? Not anymore, because Handyman Formula by D-Bond is a patented chemical adhesive remover. It's used in the building and home maintenance industry, but now it's available for your home use, for your DIY projects. Unglue stickers, silicone rubber, labels, price tags, flex tape, weather stripping, carpet glue, wood glue, liquid nails, even 3M 5200. And it dissolves graffiti. Yeah, graffiti. Handyman Formula by D-Bond works, and it's safe to use on most surfaces. No need to call a professional. Don't get out the pliers and blowtorch. Just apply a little Handyman Formula by D-Bond and wait 90 seconds, then quickly and easily pull the items apart. Get unstuck. Visit DBondHandymanFormula.com. That's DBondHandymanFormula.com or call 561-575-4200. Handyman Formula by D-Bond.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, the KGRADB.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, Renee Barnett, and we are here tonight with our very own James Martin, who is talking with us about genealogy and some of the research he's done in that area into his genealogy and others. And also, we were talking about some of those crazy village names at the end of the show that, English people somehow came up with. And I was saying that, I was hard pressed to come up with any sort of counterpart here in the United States. But we had someone in our chat room who was good enough to offer up Intercourse, Pennsylvania. So while we were on break, Bill, our wonderful producer, James, and I started looking, and we did find a few, and there are some pretty silly ones. There's Ding Dong, Texas. This is my personal favorite, Booger Hole, West Virginia. Now, what in the world could have... Oh, it was because of the boogeyman, which also in the South was referred to as the Booger Man, which I can attest to personally. Chicken, Alaska. Hot Coffee, Mississippi. There's that old Intercourse, Pennsylvania again. Monkey's Eyebrow, Kentucky. All right, that's enough of that. Oh, God, those were so funny, though. But now I'd like to ask James to pose a question to the chat room so that one of you will have a free session with James into your own family genealogy, or if you just want to speak genealogy generally to him, then please answer this question as quickly as you can, which James is going to pose. Answer it in the chat room. Chat room is on Discord. Look up KGRA. Got a couple more seconds. And Bill's going to let us know who answered first correctly. So, James, drum roll, please.
Drum roll.
What is the question?
So, what I would like to know from your listeners is how many types of British surname are they? So, how many types of British surname are there?
How many types of British surnames? Is this going to be a multiple choice or just straight up?
Okay, we can do multiple choice. Is it either 10, 7, 3, or 11?
First person to answer. Bill's going to let us know. All right. Well, that will be fun, and congratulations to whoever wins that. We will get you hooked up with James. And also, again, if you'd like to book a session with James or speak to him about it, and find out what the cost is, which is going to be very, very reasonable, I already know, then you can let us know that as well. Now, James, should they just email you, right? CaptainJamesMartin@gmail.com.
Yeah.
If you have a question for James regarding setting up a session or your interest in the subject matter tonight, please email him at captainjamesmartin@gmail.com. All right. I wonder if we have a winner yet. Bill, anybody guessed? I'm hearing nothing from Bill. Okay. We're going to go forward. So what those numbers again were?
So the question was, how many types of British surname are there? Are there 10, 7, 3, or 11?
10, 7. Oh, we have a winner. All right, we have a winner. His name is Ronald, and he was the first person to get this right. Ronald, congratulations. You're going to really enjoy visiting with James on this amazing subject. And Bill's going to get your email to make sure that you get connected. But you can also email James directly at captainjamesmartin@gmail.com. So that'll be fun, looking into Ronald's family tree.
Yeah, and just to give you the answer, just for everyone who's
right, of course.
What is the answer? There are 7. So I'll go through them with you, but just to say the origin of surnames tell a story in themselves. Surnames come around really between the 12th and 16th, 17th century. And the idea behind them is, well, I can't put any finer point in it. There are some more complicated ideas, but it's really for tax purposes. It's not about inheritance.
Surnames were then, occupation names or sometimes even place names.
Yeah, so we'll start off. Firstly, the first type of surname is that of an occupation, as you've said. So one of the most common types of the most common surname in the UK, in England, is Smith, which is a occupation. So a blacksmith, for example. The most common surname in France, by the way, is my own, which is Martin. But occupation. So imagine you're back in the 14th century, in the 1300s, and the taxman's come in, or they're wanting to find out who Thomas, who might have been known as Thomas of Cockermouth. But who is he? There might be 3 or 4 Thomases. So the taxman comes in, and instead it goes to, it's Thomas the blacksmith, Thomas Smith. So some examples of an occupational surname are things like Archer, Baker, Clark, a Cooper, Cook, Mason, Page, Smith, Taylor, Turner. The second type of surname is one that describes a characteristic. So let me just say this about your occupation. It's a sort of family curse. So if you imagine at one point in history where someone might have been known as, just Thomas or, David or John. In fact, the most common name in the 14th century was William, John and Richard. Suddenly, whatever that person's profession was, has sort of cursed that family ever after.
That's right.
So, it tells that story. Who was it that started off with the surname? The second type is a personal characteristic, which is, if we're talking about the sort of curse of the surname, it's even worse. So the description of a personal characteristic, so it might be a description of someone's size. So if your name is Thomas Short, unfortunately, it means that somewhere way back in time, one of your ancestors was short. So that's been it really for your family has been sort of cursed in that way. Equally, a surname such as Red or Reed R-E-E-D, which comes from red. Could very well be a bit of high blood pressure, perhaps, or had just run into the village after doing a mammoth trek, and suddenly, there you go, you'll be Reed from now on. A character trait such as Strong, a common surname in Cumbria and southern Scotland. For example, if your name is Alan Strong, a couple of my friends are called Alan Strong, that describes a character trait. So again, it's telling a bit of a story. You also have...
Is it a character trait or a physical trait?
Bit of physical trait, yeah.
Or could it be strong of will,
Could be strong of will. I mean, some other examples would be things like swift, stern, things like this. Your other type is a place name. So if your surname is, Robert Redford, for example, have a guess where you're from. Your family hails from a particular place. If your surname's Sutton, for example, one of my, not my favourite author, that would be Mark Twain, I suppose, but Jack London, turn of the century author, well, have a guess where his ancestors hailed from.
Wow.
You have the name of an estate. This is our third one. So a famous one would be Elizabeth Windsor.
Yes.
That would be the
House
the Queen.
of Windsor, yeah.
Yeah. But it's from the holdings of a castle or an estate, something like that. The fourth one is a geographical feature or something about the landscape. So if your surname is Bush... Sorry, I was just keeping with the rude names and what have you. But if your surname is Stone or Snow, John Snow, I think is relatively well known now. It's a physical feature of the landscape. Brooks, Mel Brooks, for example. A brook is a very small stream, river. Greenwood, another one. Scott Greenwood, for example, it's a descriptor. But then you have what are called...
I understand, or I've read that Barnett, which of course is my last name and happens to be also my maiden name, I go by, was named after this burning of trees, Barnet, after Burnet.
It could be.
Is that possible? That's not possible. Very interesting.
No, I mean, sorry to agree with you.
Quite the commoner I am.
Well, while you're doing that dreadful, please, just a message to all Americans, please stop with that, all right, governor, impression.
All right, governor.
We have a load of different accents, most of which you'll need...
all that Tommy Rot.
You'll need... I'll do my impression of you, Renee.
Oh, no.
Let me ask you this.
No!
But actually, Barnet...
That is Mike Bill. No.
Barnet is also a place, if any of you have ever visited London, Barnet is a borough in London, so it could very well be a place name. The fifth one that I wanted to mention is called, these are known as patronymics or matronymics. So this means a lot of cultures have this.
Like the son of so-and-so, or
son of or daughter of. So if you've ever visited Iceland, you'll be known as Bjorn's son, the son of Bjorn, or perhaps Bjarne's dottir. Dottir obviously sounds like daughter, and that, if you were thinking that, that's exactly what it is. We still have it in if you've got British ancestry. So if your surname is Harrison, Wilson, literally Will's son, John's son, Greg's son, Stephen's son, example. Madison, so I'm just trying to keep with the presidents. Madison might sound like actually the Mad part comes from Maud. So Maud being a female name, so Maud's son, for example. Marriott is another one, the hotel chain. Marriott comes from Mary. You can also have some, so you've got patronymic and matronymic. You've got, if you've got Scottish ancestry, ancestral surnames are also bunched in with this. So Campbell from Clan Campbell, Douglas from Clan Douglas, MacDonald, etc., etc. Stewart, my own family. Stewart, the origin of that surname comes from steward, someone who was looking after the throne, basically. I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek there, but that develops into Stewart. And the last one is, so we've had matronymic, patronymic. The last one is signifies ownership or patronage, as it's sometimes described. But if your surname is Davids or Richards, then it denotes that you were owned by someone called Richard.
Wow.
Variations on that might be if your surname is Kilpatrick. Kilpatrick, Keeler comes from church, but not in this instance, meaning more a follower of someone called Patrick, most likely Saint Patrick. Mm-hmm. So again, it's ownership in a very different, in a different way. Well, these surnames, and again, if you're looking at your family tree, you've already made a good start if you can find the origin of your surname. If you're part of if your surname is that of a town, for example, it can be useful to find out the origin of that town. So, for example, there's a place called Exeter that was a Roman town. It was called Isca Dumnoniorum, which means basically the fort, the Isca of the Dumnoni tribe who occupied Cornwall, Devon, and Brittany.
We have in Exeter, New York, which was the site of a big UFO incident.
Well, that Exeter corrupts, so it starts off Isca Dumnoniorum. The Saxons take over, and they call it Isca, the river. Isca Arta, the castle by the river. Isca Arta becomes Exeter. So the reason I'm mentioning that is it's all very interesting talking about Exeter. I think that's the longest I've ever spoke about Exeter, to be honest. But what you've got there is expect there to be some corruption in your family name. Dictionaries are a relatively new thing. As we go further back in time, there isn't any standardized spelling. So you're reliant...
A lot of the spelling of names was phonetic. Yeah. And so people might have spelled it in different ways as they heard it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there could be definitely variations on the spelling of your name.
That's one of the brick walls. The next brick wall you'll find... if you've got British ancestry, you're going to find that the beginning of church records from the 1550s, the Elizabethan period, might begin to dry up. You'll find this also with most European heritage. The reason for it, if you're lucky enough to get that far back, you have to bear in mind the cost of paper and ink at the time is phenomenal. So the luxury of writing information down, it really is a luxury. Now, if you can get any records prior to that brick wall, you're most likely going to be looking at someone who was famous or most certainly some wealth. Please don't be disheartened if you find yourself getting back to the 1700s and then you found something and it takes you back to the 1500s and then you hit a brick wall. Most people will. You then, if you're, I'm just going to stick with British, but there are variations in different countries. You'd be looking for different spelling of surname. You're looking at where different towns. Most people aren't, unless you have money, aren't travelling vast distances back then. Let me talk about US geography. This is just, it's interesting to know, not need to know. If you imagine the distances that people can travel on a horse in Canada and in Eastern England, there are ridings. So we have the East Riding of Yorkshire in England, and there are ridings in Canada. Their constituencies, their districts, in other words. These ridings are how far you can travel by horse. If you look at the geography of the US, you can see that the further east you go, the smaller the state is. And that's because, well, how do you control a large area if you're going by horse? So that's the reason for the small state size. As the railways come about, you find that you can control a larger territory. So the states become larger the further west you go in the US. But also what it means for our family trees is when we're in the Victorian period, this is where you're going to see a lot more travel. The ability to move rapidly by train and, of course, now by plane. If you were looking at my family history and you're looking at me, for example, I drop off the edge of a cliff if you're looking on the British records. You'd need to look in the French records at the moment to find me anywhere. So the ability to travel means that you need to keep that in mind. For the Victorian period, you might have people who travel for work. One part of my family moved from Cornwall up to Cumbria because they were miners, and it was a bit of a leap to go from Cumbria to Cornwall to Cumbria. It's such a large distance, but that was it. It was work, Victorian period. If you're back in the 1500s, though, you're not going to find too much travel. So if you're looking at a town or a city, something like that, and you're looking for David Richards, for example, you're not going to find that name in 1500s too commonly. But if you then find another record up in, let's say he's based in London, and then you find someone, John Richards, who's up in Edinburgh, the chances of them being from the same family are very limited indeed. You would need something in black and white to really demonstrate that firstly in the 1500s Scotland's a separate country. Furthermore, the distances involved, you would need to be very wealthy, and why would you be travelling? People did move around. There's a lot of people moving around. People were mobile, but we're referring to where someone is from. Now, if you get past that brick wall, then you've got a bit of an open stretch. You'll find you get past that brick wall. Let's say you get back to the 1480s. The chances are you'll be on a relatively good stream all the way back to the Norman invasion in 1066 in the UK. If you find French ancestry after the invasion, it's a separate story. You'll be able to get as far back perhaps as the 900s, but if you focusing on British just for the time being, you're going to find the Norman conquest. It's going to be a brick wall. This is where, if you're looking for surnames, so I can give you
the Norman conquest. Wasn't Henry involved in that? Henry I?
That was William the First.
William the First. That was his father. No.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
His son was William Rufus, William II, and then Henry I. Who once said, "Will someone rid me of this troublesome turd?" And that, of course, led to the execution of Thomas Becket.
Oh my gosh!
That was Henry I.
That was Henry I. Oh my gosh, that's funny. And I as well are both really interested in history in general. Outside of our own family connections or anything like that. So, I mean, I get why people who are interested in history would be interested in their family history, genealogy. But what is it that you think we really get from looking backward?
Just two quick things on that. My great grandma's one of her relatives was called Stamper. It was a corruption of a French name, town name called Étampes. It really means stamp, and that's in northern France. So it told me what my DNA had already confirmed. To be fair, so you get a bit of a personal connection. So if you've done a DNA test, it's validation. Actually, to answer your question directly, Renee, I want to criticise the world education system outside of Finland and to an extent South Korea. When we're in school, this happened to me as well. I just have not just an interest. I qualified myself in history and other things. My great love is, of course, astronomy. But that's another story. My criticism is you sat in school and you're mostly taught about, in the US, most certainly about the Revolutionary War, or that little spat, as we call it, or I prefer to call it the Fourth British Civil War. Or if you're in the UK, you're taught about how misogynistic Henry VIII was. And then you're given a list of dates of war, and we wonder why it is we keep going to war. My criticism is that, generally speaking, the people at the time, now not for the US Revolution, but no one cared about Henry VIII and who he was beheading, who he was having intercourse, Pennsylvania with. No one cared. It was a battle for survival. And what you get out of this is an appreciation for how hard life was. You get an appreciation for that you're part of the story. Human history hasn't been written down for most of it. Most of our species, 2 million years I think we're back to now, our tradition is oral history. So don't think you're cheating if you listen to an audiobook. It's you're commemorating your ancestors who used to tell the story. The paper wasn't around, it was too expensive and hadn't been invented. But history written by the victors, history is not just about war, but the story of us is what you're looking at. Now, I mentioned astronomy being my first love. The reason I sort of gave up after doing a year of astronomy with astrophysics, the reason for that is because looking at the sky is a love. We're part of a huge universe. We've just had a Perseverance land yesterday. Yeah. But the story of us, of our species, is essentially what you're looking at. And I can't think of two things that are more grand. The universe, infinitely large, and our species, who hasn't been around for too long compared to the universe. but there's been a lot of us, about 10 billion of us to be exact, 100 billion, excuse me, to be exact. So it means that you aren't being told, look at Henry VIII, look at these people in the history lesson. What you're doing is forging, a real history that's ended with you. You're telling a story and you're part of it. There are lots of things we don't do when we're walking around towns and cities or tourist places. What we don't do is we don't pause to look up at buildings and look up at the brickwork, and we don't do that because we've got very busy lives. What this does, family trees can be very de-stressful, and there's a mental health epidemic out there at the moment. And this can give focus. But as I say, you feel like you're part of something bigger.
That's it. That's what I was just thinking. And it's part of something bigger, and a sense of your place in the universe, a sense of belonging, in a way. You know, you can go back and see, you know, where you came from, you know, what kind of stock you're made of, and, you know, that sort of thing. And it also, going back generation by generation, you then, you know, start getting a sense of the connection, you know, because your grandfather was connected to your great-grandfather, and then your great-great-grandfather, and so on and so on. You know, it's not just looking at people that lived, you know, 100 or 500 years ago. It's like, why should I care? It's like you can see why you should care, because, and you can actually get a feeling about that person. It brings them to life.
Well, exactly. So you've heard of the Black Death. Yersinia pestis, the bubonic pneumonic plagues, wiped away entire towns and villages. The death rate, we're going through nothing like that, by the way, but we're going through a pandemic of our own. This is our century's pandemic,
our plague,
perhaps. But congratulations, listeners. Well done. You've worked very hard. Thank you very much. You should be very proud of yourselves, because your family were either immune to the plague or didn't get it. So well done for surviving that, because the odds were against you at one point. With a death rate of between 50 and 100%, we average this to, 70, 80% in some places, 50% minimum. Imagine 50% of people you know aren't around anymore. Stop smiling if that's what you're thinking. But just imagine that. Who buries the dead when the person who buries the dead's no longer with us? That's you. That's something that you haven't had to work for. That's your ancestors. That's what your ancestors did. They went through hardship across the planet. They went through hardship, and it ended with you. Every right that you have to freedom of speech, expression, whatever it is, didn't come from nowhere. It came from your ancestors who fought for it. So when I talk about honouring memory and feeling that you've got some ownership of history, that's it. And yes, you might find that you're connected to some royal, or to some wealthy noble and all of that. You might find that you're related to someone who has committed hideous crimes. But let me just say this. That's not who you are, but you can also learn from it. If that is something, you might find there's a slave owner. You might find that you're connected to Simon de Montfort, for example, God forbid, which I am a relative to part of his family much further before him. Learn lessons from it. If you find something unsettling, reflect. Is that you? You'll find that the answer is no, but it made part of you, and perhaps their children didn't think like that person.
Right. And also, I remember I used to be afraid that, I would go back and, being from the South particularly, that I'd find a bunch of slave owners, in my past or something like that. That was really shameful. And then I thought, but, I think when we do find something negative like that, and I'm sure we all have them somewhere buried in our family trees, it's like it sort of gives you the opportunity to make it right for your family. He was that way, but I'm going to do good in the world so that, this will be my family legacy, not that.
There was, you find this, and just remember, there are people who, if you come to a dead end, there are people whose memories you can't really understand, but who weren't who wasn't that person. People who were struggling in a horrible way. It means that if you were poor. If you find a workhouse or, from very humble beginnings, that there might not be records. Unfortunately, a lot of the passenger records from the settling of the Europeans or invasion, depends on your perspective, but the settling of the Americas by Europeans, there are a lot of records, so you should be able to find where you've, where roughly you've held from. But there are a lot of dead ends, and you might not be able to find everything. The other thing, just to mention, the further back in time you go, we're talking about memory. Please don't be too startled to find that you might not be able to find many women. Men really did. They were recorded. They were the people who went out and did things, had the money, had the rights to property, things like this. Unless there were an exceptional circumstance, the further back in time you go, you will find that you can't find too many women. Unless you've got a marriage record.
Things weren't that great for women back in those days, that's for sure. I mean, your husband or whatever male figure was in your family was always in control of everything. If you cheated on your husband, or I think there was a story back in, I think it was Victorian times, where a woman, had caught her husband cheating on her or something. Anyway, she shot him and she killed him, and they didn't try her for murder. They tried her for petty treason. Mm-hmm. Because it was treasonous to go against the men, who were in control of you.
In the Elizabethan period, it was expected that if you were an indentured servant, that means, in other words, you were sort of impressed. You had to work within a lord's house, for example, lord of the manor, whatever. It was expected that he would try and force himself upon a woman, perhaps even men as well, but anyway, it was expected that way. So legal dismissal was perfectly fine for the lord to say, well, I fancy her. The reality is he would get rid of... not everyone, we've got to keep this in mind, not everyone would be like this, but would have raped, forced himself upon her, and then sacked her. That was perfectly expected. Most of the courts, well, all of the courts, were occupied by men, and this behaviour was expected. You might find some pretty grisly. You might find some pretty grisly things by our standards. I'm not saying any of that is right. As a victim of abuse myself, I really am not saying that. Please don't look through our eyes to the past, because that is not how they wouldn't see what we have today. You must put it into a context. Also, bear in mind that if you're looking...
What are you saying? That because of, sort of standard practices at the time, what they were doing was common, and they didn't see it as, abhorrent like we do today.
Yes.
Just like slavery, slave owners, slept with their women servants and had lots of children, and they just took whatever they wanted from other people that were enslaved to them. It's the very same thing.
Absolutely. But it's important that, the whole point of history is to learn from our mistakes. I wish more people would do that. Perhaps we would stop repeating them. But it's important that when you find something that's shocking to us today, you might be tempted to say, I don't want to look further back. What I'm saying there is, to that person, that might have been the standard, as distasteful and disgusting as it is for our eyes. For example, if you're looking at Roman history, you can't look at it through our eyes today. You have to see, the further back in time you go, to give some context to this, it's very dark. There's no electric lighting. In fact, really, before the turn of the 1800s, there's no gas lighting either. If you're from modest means, well, you can't afford a candle. So don't think, if you're looking at Hollywood interpretations of average life in the medieval period, think again. It's dark. For the average person, John the Dirt Shoveler, I call this, or Jane the Dirt Shoveler, it doesn't matter. It's dark. Change your clothes. If you're expecting colours and reds and, purples and blues and all of that, think again. Change your clothing, well, perhaps once a year. Linen was immaculately clean, by and large. So if you got in a time machine and went back to an inn in the medieval period, you'd find the linen very clean, but you wouldn't be. It's like I say, it's very dark. You have to be wealthy. Look, people were receiving the equivalent, workers, medieval Europe were receiving the equivalent of $10 a year. Yeah. And rent. Rent didn't exist necessarily, but food was somewhere in the region of $5 in that year, and we're talking very basics. But then you've got the upkeep of everything else. That's not clothing. It's not lighting. You get up when it's light and you go to sleep when it's dark. You eat when you're hungry. The idea of, for example, another thing to bear in mind, the concept of spring and autumn, or fall, as you guys put it, didn't exist either. It's a totally different world. So try and if you get that far back, just try to put yourself in that person's shoes. You have to go to church. If you don't, there is no atheist back then. The medieval period. If you're thinking, oh well, they were atheists or something like that. Nobody's an atheist. Saying that you're an atheist is the equivalent of saying you don't believe in trees. It's a very, very different mindset. And so what I have to say is don't live in the past, don't live in the present, don't live in the future. Take regular holidays to each. If you find yourself at a brick wall, or you find yourself at a point that's very uncomfortable, don't wall it up yourself. Leave it there, and move on. The further back you go, the more roots you've got. You might find something surprising. And if in the very end you're not excited by being part of the great human journey, then at the very least, doing your family tree gives you something to talk about at the dinner table.
Absolutely. I could see it being a real, stimulant for conversation in families. Especially if you've still got some old elder relatives around, and I think they would be thrilled in a lot of cases to share their stories, and that you would be interested, don't you? I mean, I've seen that happening with people that I know that have gotten into they says, oh my gosh, I've talked to my grandfather more than I've talked to him, in 10 years in this past year, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a way to connect with your family that's still here.
It's a lot of countries don't treat their elders very well. Don't treat the disabled very well, don't treat their elders very well. The previous generation has a duty to pass on what they've learned and what they've made a mistake with in their time to the next generation. This is such a good way of trying to understand someone else's upbringing. For example, I'm my generation, so I'm 33. I'm actually 34, but I've written off last year like most people. I'm of the generation where I can remember not having mobile phones or tablets or anything like this, and that if you wanted to arrange to meet up with someone, you better be there. Now, if you can't make a meeting, you just text, or we've got a glass screen. That glass screen gives us access to a wealth of information, but it's been such a rapid change within recent times that when we speak to our elders, our mums, dads, relatives, friends, whomever it is, and they describe, there was no such thing as a remote control. We had to get up off the sofa and go all the way over to the TV station where there were 3 TV channels. You think, wow, how barbaric was that? Speaking to people, getting a good idea as to what was going on with them. It's a really good start. Again, 3 steps with Family Tree. Step 1, absolutely ask relatives and friends, copies of photographs, you name it. Try and understand a bit of the context of the time, as I've said. 2, this is a health warning. You will either become obsessed or it's going to become your new hobby. Those people who... So if you ever study history or anything like that, you have to do this. So I studied a bit classics, so looking at the Roman period, and you have to understand, are they related, and what was the family set up? The Julius Caesar, his dad was called Julius Caesar. Is he from the house of the Julii? What does that exist? That kind of stuff. So this is second nature. But when you start looking at your own history, I was trying to find a bit more about my mum's side of the family, who are from modest means. There's some workhouse stuff in there, and they were immigrants from Ireland. And I was trying to find just something. My dad's whole family, were well off, so I understood a little bit more about that side, and I was bored, absolutely bored, rigid. And then I found something, and I've never looked back.
Wow.
I know that experience has been the same with a lot of people who say, I'm not interested in history. I don't think anyone's not interested in history. I just think they're not interested in the way that they've been taught.
That's it.
But
That's
something
spot on.
Something ignites the imagination. And that's where I say the health warning, it can become an obsession or a hobby. Locking yourself up away in a room and doing all that. Can I just suggest that this is fun for all the family? We are living in a golden age, just bringing it back to where we started. One of the things COVID has done has meant that those who work in archives, libraries, where traditionally the paper-based version of family histories, church records, etc., have been that you've had to go to somewhere. Because of COVID, those archivists are scanning and digitizing a hell of a lot of those records. So it's easier now to find digital archives than ever before. So it's a good time to start. If this is something you've been thinking about, now's the time. It really is. And so that's point two. And my last point is, don't be disheartened when you hit those brick walls. Don't hit your head on them. Just go, okay, that's as far as I can go for now. I might need to do a bit of reading, or I might need to watch a documentary, or whatever it is that you do, whichever method works for you. And then move on to someone else.
Yep. Well, do you have time for an off-the-wall question from the host? You mentioned earlier, when we were talking about medieval times and how dark it was and how difficult it was, you said you ate when you were hungry. I just had something popped into my head. When did it start, the practice of sitting down to the family meal? When?
So there was always a breakfast, a breakfast, your first meal of the day. People sitting down, it's a class issue. People would sit down. The formalities with, breakfast, dinner, tea, as I call it, come from Georgian period, banqueting, really some of the kings. But in answer, abundance, the ability. So just very, very quickly, Turnip Townsend, if you want to look him up, anyone, yes, that was his nickname, Turnip Townsend, discovered a way of growing crops, turnips, effectively and efficiently all year round. So what that meant is animals didn't have to be slaughtered in the harvest time. You could continue to feed them through winter. That meant there was an abundance of food and resources, so milk, eggs, butter, meat, things like that. That was the beginning step. But to summarise, the Victorian period is when we get our formalities that we understood today. Owning a fork, by the way, comes from a pledge of loyalty to Charles II when he was restored to the throne. But I think as we're coming to the end of the show, more on that later. Feel free to. Also,
we really ought to mention that Martha Washington invented the spork.
Yes,
I think that's very, very important.
To save steel for the war effort, yes.
That's right.
And iron.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's been great having you as ever. Thank you so much for everything that you do. A constant inspiration to me and everybody that listens to you, and also a good friend. So and a relative. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I hope everyone will enjoy us next week. Yes, I hope you do. Hope you'll join us next week when Andrea Perron joins us. She's going to talk about the true history of the haunting of the house portrayed in the Conjuring movie, The Conjuring House, and also her evolution since then and what she's into now. It's going to be interesting. So I hope everyone will come back next week when we have Andrea Perron. And thank you once again, James Martin. And we will see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone. Take care of each other.